Good night and welcome to another edition of In Touch. I'm your host, Jadia Japie Emmanuel. I'm smiling because of the number of messages I've received between 6 p.m. and now. I do not know why, but many persons seem to be expecting the Prime Minister to be my guest tonight. No, unfortunately for some, unfortunately for others, we will not be having a part 2 of the Prime Minister's address to the nation. But if you missed the address to the nation, you can always go to the Press Secretary to the Prime Minister's YouTube channel. It is available there. And you can also check Facebook. The text of that address is also available on the official Facebook page. When this show was introduced last year, we did tell you that we would be focusing on a number of issues: political, cultural, social, current and not so current events. And so it will not surprise you that tonight we will depart from the popular topic, from the topic of the day, and we'll be focusing on one of the very important institutions that would be responsible for some things that matter to every single St. Lucian. For some time, we have heard a lot of talk about conservation, about our environment, about ensuring that what we do today does not place our future generations in a worse position. We always want to ensure that we leave the world better than we found it. And so tonight we will be focusing on the National Conservation Authority. We'll be speaking about the activities. We'll be getting some background information as well as to what exactly is happening at the NCA, what they have responsibility for, and how you as a citizen can play your part to ensure that the responsibilities that they are tasked with would, of course, be carried out. We too have a part to play as members of society, and so it gives me great pleasure to welcome to In Touch the General Manager of the NCA, Mr. David Hippolyte. Good night and welcome to In Touch.
Thank you for having me, and let me say good night to your viewers.
Yes, and they have been anxiously awaiting. I did not announce that the Prime Minister would be here tonight, so I do not know why. I believe there was just this assumption given where we are right now. But we want to focus on the NCA. You're the General Manager. You've been the General Manager from September 2012
That is correct, yes.
to present.
Yeah.
I know even before we go into the NCA today, many persons would be very interested in knowing when you came into the NCA, what was it like? I'm sure you would have been charged with, for some it may have been a very intimidating task, I must say, coming into an institution of that nature. We know that over the years we have heard a number of charges being laid at a number of our organizations, not just the NCA but the SSDF and all of the other quasi-government institutions. There seemed to have been that sense that these institutions over the last few years were left to run themselves and that there was no sort of leadership or direction. What was the NCA like when you came in September 2012?
Okay, well, I found an institution that really employed somewhere around 100 persons, just over 100 persons. And I found that the institution, I went in with the idea that it was really all about conservation. But unfortunately, when I got there, there was sort of like a rude awakening. There was some conservation, but the concentration wasn't really in that area per se. It was, I suppose, there was some residue of the fact that the organization initially started with the STEP program, and so it seemed like more of an organization trying to get a social balance for some people, try to help some people in their economic circumstances and so on. So that was the kind of concentration that was with the organization. And so when I came, knowing that we, in St. Lucia and around the world, there was a strong concentration on the environment. We heard about climate change and changes in sea level, the sea level growing by a couple inches, and so on. I thought that it was something that we really needed to concentrate on rather than the actual social aspect. I mean, that was still important, of course. But we had to change the way we did things and the way we looked at things.
In terms of the financial state of the institution, what can you say to that?
Well, the institution appeared to have always been struggling. However, there were situations like the audits of the organization. Some of these things were not being done on time, and so of course we had to make the decision that we had to get those audits, because really and truly the audits of the authority has to be tabled in Parliament at least by the end of any financial year. So of a calendar year. If the financial year ends like it normally does in March. Then we have 3 months to prepare our accounts to be audited and so on, and then it's supposed to go to the minister. In our case, it's the Minister of Social Transformation, and he's supposed to table it at Parliament by 6 months after. So, we really wanted to get on top of that, and in fact, I must say that we've done a fair job. In fact, the parastatal unit within the Prime Minister's office, we've actually gotten praise that even the last set of accounts or audits, we were the first to present ours. And I think we may be the first, although we are a little bit over time, but I think we could be the first again this time around, because it's almost completed for us.
Indeed. In terms of the shift in focus to ensure that there is equal emphasis, or probably more emphasis, on the whole conservation aspect, as opposed to the social needs, which of course you said is important. Where are we in terms of shifting the focus, or bringing to light the issue that you just raised and you thought to be extremely important given the changes happening around the world? Okay.
As a matter of fact, this is where I have to applaud the government of St. Lucia, because we wanted to do that, and the government actually heard us. And what happened is that I remember we were getting, I think, $1.8 million at that point at the time when I came in, 1.825. And
as a subvention?
Yes.
Okay.
And knowing the fact that we wanted to change direction, we actually, our subvention was upped a bit, and so we now at like 1.912 million. And again, I'm saying I want to applaud the government for that, because that allowed us to make the shift. So what we did is, the first part of it is we had to try to change the culture. So we had to get our employees to understand they were not scavengers, and they were not just beach workers and that kind of thing. So we decided to change the job titles. So those persons we used to call beach workers and so on, they are now called conservation assistants. And the team leaders were called foremen and so on, a foreman. And
reminds me of STEP.
Right. So now we changed that, and we call them conservation team leaders.
Oh, okay.
And what we did to complement that, we decided now to go into training. In fact, we really leaning heavily there, and it's work in progress. And so we actually planned with the forestry department in the first instance. Some of our employees, we had them work with the forestry department, and so they kind of trained them in some aspects of forest management. We then had training with the fisheries department, and they gave us, well, the entire staff really, training in turtle management, because we work along beaches largely, and we wanted to understand how to manage turtles when they come to nest, and if they get into trouble and so on. So things like that. So we did that. Then the other thing I found out was that I thought that would have been important for us was to, if we're going to change direction, we need to do that with sound strategy. And so we decided that we're definitely going to organize, we're going to have a strategic plan in place. And most of these things I'm mentioning there, those are firsts for the organization. The organization had dabbled with some strategic direction before, but never had a strategic plan in place. And so we went through that process. And as I was telling you earlier, because our role sort of overlaps that of other agencies, we actually invited all those agencies to sit with us to develop the strategic plan. So agencies like the St. Lucia National Trust, Environmental Health, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, NEMO, we had Fisheries Department, the Forestry Department, and most of those organizations that we deal with. It's practically unavoidable. Crown lands and so on, we must work with those agencies. I'll give you a typical example. We are responsible for beaches as well as protected and other designated areas.
Right.
Our boundary is basically from the sea, low water mark, between the high and low water marks, and we go inland about 108.5 feet.
Okay.
The Crown lands starts from that same level and they go in 186.5 feet. So we actually we can say we get our power in that sense from the Crown lands in that case, because they had to give us administrative control so that we could take on our responsibility.
So inevitably there would be networking between the various organizations, but I think of the National Trust as an example. Once we hear the beaches all and protected areas, then we think of the St. Lucia National Trust. What is the relationship like between the NCA and the National Trust? What kind of collaboration do we see between the two agencies?
Oh, we have a very, very good relationship with them. As a matter of fact, last week, Thursday, I was at a training program they had for security, in terms of securing space that you manage and so on. And there was a consultant doing that training. And this week, we have another set of training, and that is to do with communities, making communities sustainable. So I'm going to that. I think it's on Thursday again. And we've worked with them in areas like along the Point Sab beach, that general area. There was like an infestation of some of the foliage, some of the trees that are around, and they were handling that. And we worked together to tackle the situation. We continue to do things like training, go to workshops together. They're responsible primarily for the Point Sab area.
Yes.
Actually, it falls under the National Trust. So we're basically the secondary agency. So again, that relationship, you must collaborate so that we can take care of that resource, so that natural resource.
When we speak of the beach, it is impossible to speak of the beach and not speak of the realities that we see in these spaces on a daily basis. The issue of pollution on our beaches. It is almost impossible to go on any beach in St. Lucia and not see some plastic bottles or things being left behind. I know that you spoke about training for your staff and that, there are staff assigned to the various beaches and so on. But at what point do we see that interaction between the NCA and members of the public? I know that it is going to be a very bad habit to break, and it would not rest solely on the responsibility on the shoulders, rather, of the NCA. But given that there are workers on some of these beaches on almost a daily basis, do we restrict them solely to cleaning up, or is there some form of engagement or any signage or something that would cause people to become more conscious of conserving the environment?
No, of course, we encourage our staff to interact with the general public in more ways than one. And in fact, nowadays, with so many tourists around, they are quite eager to guide and direct tourists, So yes, there's that relationship. However, this is where I applaud you, because coming on this program is one way, not just this program, but others as well, of getting across to the public and letting them know exactly what we do. We don't want to be an organization in obscurity, and so we want to get the message out, because there are lots of messages to send. And you were talking about plastics and so on.
Yes.
And man-made waste is really a problem. In fact, for the NCA, especially when it rains heavily, I mean, you should see the kinds of garbage and so on we get. coming from those rivers, and it's a bit of a concern because, I mean, you can imagine that you of course you use the beach to recreate, you come to relax and so on, but you have to compete with plastics and all
And
all
I
kind of
could tell
debris
you,
and so on.
the beach is one of my favorite places ever. Are there any guidelines and policies for the use of the beaches in particular? I know that there would be for public spaces, but most times when we think of the use of the beach, we tend to think of mass crowd events or events organized by, well-known organizations or agencies, or events for commercial purposes. But in terms of the everyday use of the beach, are there guidelines for the use of the beach, and are there things that we should be doing in order to access the beach or to use the beach that we are not doing?
Okay, not really. What we have though is, if persons are looking to have some kind of major activity, for instance, if your family wants to have a family event, really and truly they're supposed to be getting permission to do that from us. And if it is a small crowd, like 10, 15 people, we call that a small crowd in our area. We don't really place the greatest emphasis on that. But when you go into, we call you looking at 50 persons, you must get permission from us to have activities, because the point is that you're talking about keeping the beach clean. We have to guide you on that. You're talking about having to get other agencies involved. We like to tell people, you have to go to the police in terms of noise. You have to go to environmental health in terms of other things. The fire service, if you're going to have a barbecue or whatever, fire is not, because you could cause a lot of problems because you could be close to dry leaves and that kind of thing, and you could get in fact, we had one not too long ago at the Shop Beach, and we had to call in the fire service. So all those things are very important to know. So whereas we don't have guidelines for individual persons per se, but we do have, if people are coming together in large numbers to have activities, and of course NEMO is also an important agency in this, the Solid Waste Management Authority, because especially if you're having mass crowd events, you need to have plans, like garbage disposal plans and so on. Although, of course, most of these activities, we are the ones who do the maintenance afterwards, the cleanup and so on. Yeah.
But you spoke of small crowds and so on, but wouldn't the guidelines or the requirements change according to the event? Say, for example, I'm having a wedding, and my guest list is just 10 persons. Can I just pick up and go on to whichever beach or wherever the sun sets and get married, or would I require a specific license no matter the size of my gathering?
Yes, we recommend that you do. Just so that we can control, keep tabs on what's happening in terms of ensuring, because we're talking about conservation. So we want to make sure that the beach is maintained so that people can enjoy it now and in the future. So we encourage people to come to us. If it is a crowd, say like up to 50 people, say about 15 to 50 persons, we would, depending on what it is, we would we would charge a fee for it. We do like a deposit, a refundable deposit. You can get it back if you, of course, make sure you pick up after you. But we also charge for the event. So that, of course, the NCA needs to be maintained. We, not because we're close to the sea, you don't just pick up water from the sea and you can run on that. I mean, so you have to take care of the organization. So we have a charge for that. But depending on the activity. So, for instance, a church may decide to have something for once we just we tell them the guidelines there. In that case, you take care of the beach, make sure you pick up after you, have your points for garbage disposal and so on, and so those guidelines, yes, but specific to individual persons. No. You mentioned something about science just a while ago.
Yes.
And yes, in fact, we're moving in that direction because we believe that, you know, it will speak volumes. We have some now at Pigeon Point and at Wadri.
Okay.
But these are get really more to persons vending, especially those who are doing so illegally.
Which is an issue that I want to discuss, but we're due for a commercial break. So please stay in touch. When we come back, we will continue our discussion with the General Manager of the NCA, and we will move into the direction of vending on the beaches, the requirements, where we are right now and what is required to ensure that we have a little bit more control in this department. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to In Touch. My guest tonight is Mr. David Hippolyte, and he's the General Manager of the NCA. We were speaking about the issue of vending, particularly vending on the beaches. For many, many, many years, this has been happening, and it is almost part of our culture, where people, you know, you are creative, you create something, or to many persons they see it as the hustle, basically. And it is a means of survival, and so they move in the direction of vending. But the issue of vending on our beaches of late seemed to be one of contention. There seemed to be a pull and tug between the more established organizations or companies and so on versus the vendors or persons who sell in trees. My understanding is that there are special guidelines and there are requirements if you are vending in a tree versus if you are vending at a bar. And so you would be requiring certain things to sell depending on what you're selling. What authority or jurisdiction would you have, the NCA? What control do you have over vending on the beaches, and when does that responsibility depart from you and go to another entity? So if I want to go to vend on the beach today, and I come to you and I say, well, I want to become a vendor on the beach, what do I need firstly? What do I need?
Okay, let me just say, as far as vending is concerned, we try our best to give persons opportunities to become small business persons. In fact, that's what it is. We encourage them to treat it like a business as well. Okay, but the idea, if you want to become a vendor, you would need to apply to the NCA. Applying means you get an application form that is filled out. You're supposed to get a certificate of character from the police. You will need to have some photos, passport photos, and also you have a couple of references. And so you submit all of that to us.
It sounds like going to get a job at the Royal Social Police Force or the fire service. So
yeah, well, it is pretty much like that, because, you know, I mean, you need to screen people so that you can have people of good.
Particularly if they're going to be interacting with members of the public and visitors.
I was just coming to say that. So that's very important, to get people of sound character and people that, you know, at least would have that good one-on-one relationship. Okay, so now on the application form would have two things: what you really want to do, what you want to vend, and also where you want to vend. So we look at the information. Now when you apply, we go by carrying capacity for each area. So for instance, Rodney Bay would have Ridgeway would have a carrying capacity, Pigeon Point would have a carrying capacity. Now, I mean, some people, of course, they would want to be in the more popular areas, what we call the active beaches. Now, the thing is, you can only put so many people in an area because there's only like one cake in that area. And so you can only subdivide into so many slices. And the point is that if you try to share it amongst more people, the more you do so, in fact, the less effective it is, and the persons themselves would find they become less economically well off. So a typical situation, for instance, we have, at this point in time, we have about 32 vendors at Mon-Lay-By, which is really way beyond.
Do they work on shifts?
No, that actually what we inherited. When I came in, that was inherited. And but there are that many people. Now, it appears to be a good thing because you 32 people are, well, you could
Well,
say
if there's
in a living, yes, and there's not much of that actually. So what is happening is that, I mean, people get just a small piece of the pie, and so it becomes difficult for them to pay their licenses. Now, our license fee is only $250 a year.
A year?
A year.
Okay.
$250 a year, just a few cents a month, or a day, sorry. And it's difficult for some people to pay that, simply because, if you go beyond the carrying capacity, you're doing more harm than good. Okay, and so it's almost like an uphill task, but we have to try, and we always try to make people understand that.
But are you seeking new opportunities or new areas where perhaps the vendors can go into so that you can redistribute, or perhaps if they, and I know this is dangerous because when people become settled in an area and they've been selling in that area, their mother was selling in that area and the mother passed on the trade to them and so on, it is difficult to uproot them or to cause them to understand the economic benefits of going elsewhere.
Right.
However, is the NCA actively seeking new spots or new economic opportunities, areas where vendors can perhaps move to, so that if I come and I say, well, I want to vend at the Monday buy, and you say to me, well, we have gone beyond our capacity, however, there is an opportunity available there, and so on.
All right, here comes what we try to do in terms of additional lay-bys, viewing points, and so on. So this is something that we actively pursuing, simply because, yes, we want to give people the opportunity. Incidentally, we have one planned for Mula Chic.
Oh yeah?
Yes, we do.
Oh, that's interesting.
We have one planned for Mula Chic. It's supposed, what we have planned is that viewing point, and also that building that used to be, I think, a radar center or something. We were actually planning to turn this into a museum.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
so there are plans for that. So that's the kind of ideas, Currently, we have the Columbet project that's in the making, and pretty soon we should be breaking ground there. That's going to be about a $650,000 project. That should give employment to some persons, to self-employment to some persons, and we're going to employ some persons in terms of security and what else. So that kind of opportunity exists. We just about doing the VG beach facility as well. So you're going to get a few more people there. So so sort of like diversifying in some cases, especially at the lookout points. In fact, today I was speaking with some gentlemen seeing about the North-South Link Road.
Okay.
And I was telling them that we actively look for those opportunities where we can get to have viewpoints and so on, so people can actually appreciate the beauty of St. Lucia from a vantage point. So
there's a lot. There's a lot to take in. But to go back to the issue of vending on the beaches, and we got to the point where, well, we were establishing. Well, we know what the requirements are already, but you need to indicate, as you said on the form, what exactly it is that you're going to vend.
That's correct, yes.
So I apply to be a craft vendor, for example. What would be the limitations? And when I am issued a license to sell, will I be restricted or limited only to what I've placed on the application, or is there room for flexibility?
No, actually that's correct. Again, we try to be very accommodative. So you spread the love, so to speak. So what we do is, in an area, we try to have varied services. So like one person may offer craft, another person may just offer apparel, another person may offer. So we try to put put variety in a particular area. And in an area, say like you at Ridgeway, we give you we subdivide it into other areas that so like this person can only sell in that area.
Okay.
Another person can only sell in that area. You're not supposed to encroach on your neighbor's areas, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All right. So I mean, as I say, you share the bread, and so everybody should get.
But I can imagine that this would be very difficult to manage sometimes, because you're dealing with different personalities, and you are dealing with individuals who believe that they have a right. They have a right to vend in that area. If, for example, this is what is selling, then this is what I'm going to sell. And here comes the issue of the alcohol on the beaches. And we have seen that it has led to a lot of, you know, exchanges, unpleasant exchanges between those who are authorized and licensed to sell versus those who are not. If an individual is given a license to sell a particular product, and that individual wishes to sell something else or to complement, so that, you know, the customers can gravitate towards them, what would be the requirement? So are vendors allowed to sell alcohol? Those who you issue licenses to, does that license give them the authority to sell food or to sell alcoholic beverages and so on at that tree or at that point that they're selling?
No, actually, we give our licenses. We give licenses in some cases to sell food.
Okay.
But no alcoholic beverages or drinks on the whole. We don't give licenses to allow those. Now, in fact, it's causing a little bit of an issue because some people do get some of them get the temporary liquor licenses.
Okay.
But what we have said is that you can sell, but not within our jurisdiction. So you can do that outside. But there's another problem where some people actually sell alcohol without the licenses. And so that is why we have to work with customs as well. In fact, that issue at Wageri that you mentioned a little earlier, that's one of the sore points, you know, that it is claimed that the vendor is vending alcohol and you have the restaurant just next door. So it's sort of a sore point, you know. But what authority would you have? If I'm issued a license, for example, I just want to be as practical as possible, because I'm already receiving comments and questions via my WhatsApp and so on. So I have a lot of comments and questions to read for you. But if I am issued a license to sell craft, for example, I would hope and assume that the NCA would be involved in monitoring and routine checks and so on to ensure that everything is okay and to ensure that we are abiding by the provisions of that license. If I am found to be doing something contrary to what I'm authorized to do, what is the next step? What authority would you have? Okay, basically we get all our authority from the Act, our Act.
Yes.
And the Act gives us the authority to issue licenses. It also gives us the authority to revoke licenses. Okay, so if you don't follow the guidelines that we give you, we can either suspend your license or revoke it completely. So we have that power. Monitoring is a big part. In fact, this is that is probably the area we have a little bit of a weakness, in the sense that you know, the NCA initially had rangers with the powers of arrest.
Yes.
And at some point, those were transferred to the police force, and it was supposed to be a unit within the rangers unit within the police force. But you know, the police force, I mean, undermanned and so on,
and
they got lost. You know, so they were actually subsumed into the force. And so we've had our challenges since then. So it's left now to those persons who are not rangers, who don't have powers of arrest, those officers within the NCA, to monitor. And you know, that has been pretty difficult. One thing I lament is in St. Lucia, we tend to, you know, you have to at some point look at enforcement, because there's no compliance, you know, and we would want people to comply so that we don't go into enforcement. What we're trying to do now, again, thanks to the government, is that we've just recently employed one ranger so far. Hopefully, if the government continues to be generous, we would be able to employ more rangers. As long as we get the rangers, we would be able to at least control what's happening.
So that ranger, does that ranger, what authority or powers would that ranger have?
Again, as long as we have, according to our act,
Yes.
as long as we have somebody who is a ranger, that person has the powers of arrest. And that person can also call on the police to assist them in whatever is being done. We have had to resort to trying to call the police, in our case, to assist us. Okay, one ranger, of course, wouldn't really not do it. At least not. It wouldn't be that person wouldn't be as efficacious as you'd want. However, it's a start.
Yes.
And as I said, we lean on the generosity of the government, and as I said, we try to do things to bring some more income now. Again, getting people to comply. As long as people comply, pay their licenses and so on, at least we'll be able to have a couple more rangers.
So we look at the area where an individual will be granted a license to operate or a license to sell one thing and they end up selling something else, like the leak and so on. What about individuals who, you know, you may wake up tomorrow, as a result of hardship and so on, decide that you want to vend, and these individuals have found a spot and so on, and not knowing that they require any special authorization or license, they decide to vend in that area. What would be the NCA's approach to regularizing? And
right, we get that, but again, the Act gives us the authority to check those persons, keep them in check, and just tell them nicely that it's not allowed. You need to be licensed. You cannot vend without a license. And of course, we always let them know it's unfair to those persons who take licenses. But again, that too is a task, because you get people doing that. So that's one of the areas where the ranger is very active to ensure that those persons who operate illegally are actually kept at bay.
I have some very interesting comments. I'll begin to read them when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after the commercial break. Welcome back to In Touch. My guest tonight is Mr. David Hippolyte, and he's the General Manager of the NCA, still on the issue of the beach vending license. And you can tell that it is a very topical issue. It's an area of concern for many individuals, because I've been getting some messages about it. And this person says, why is it that people who do not even use their beach vending license still have it? This makes it difficult for others who are trying to make an honest living and they are unable to access the licenses. So for example, the books may show you have 100 licenses, but if you check the areas, you do not have 5 persons operating in that area. There are individuals, especially boat owners, who would have licenses and do not use it. That needs to be addressed so that more opportunities can be made available to those who really need it.
Okay. Well, we do have an officer who is responsible for issuing licenses and actually checking all our vendors, so that person would know who is an active vendor or not. But we must be careful, because some vendors, they do have their licenses, but some of them tend not to operate in a heavy way during the off season, outside of the tourist season. And you'll see them very active during the tourist season. So you get that situation. Quite apart from that, the Act makes it clear as to how we can revoke somebody's license. In a case like if the person is bankrupt, and we know that if we know that for a fact. A situation like the person has contravened one of the conditions of our Act.
Like selling liquor?
That's very true.
Okay.
Very true. Okay. And a case like somebody behaving disorderly and so on, So things like that, we're guided by the Act. But we must be, very careful that not because somebody is not there every day that they that doesn't mean that they're not coming to apply their trade.
There may be instances, for example, where somebody is a holder of a license and the person has probably given up on that, or the person is found to be operating somewhere else or has a job somewhere else and decides not to be a vendor anymore. Do we have any cases like that?
Yeah, but yes, we would. But
registered on the books, but not really active or practicing?
Well, not really. I mean, when you get persons who were holders of licenses, I would say were, because then they would still think of vending in a particular area but not paying the license.
Okay.
So that, and we allow for a certain amount of time before we certainly excise them. Yeah.
There is another question. The person says, if you are a vendor, say for example you're operating in the cashews market, you're a vendor, you're a known vendor, you've been doing it all of your life, what is stopping you from, on a slow day or a Saturday, from vending at the beach, at the VG beach, for example? Why would one vendor need 2 licenses to vend?
Well, we don't have jurisdiction over the market area. That's totally different, you know. But for us, as we say, people apply. We look at the application as long as it's sound and we have the space, and we feel that the person, you know, is credible enough in terms of sound. We issue the license. As I said, yes, we try as much as possible to, you know, to spread, make sure that as many people as possible can benefit from going into their own businesses. However, you know, we don't do that kind of research to find out if you are a vendor at the market, and you know, we give you an opportunity just the same, you know.
Indeed. You can continue to send your comments and your questions. You can email us, in touch with jadia@gmail.com, and also the WhatsApp and BBM information is on your screen as well. We'll be opening up the phone lines in just a little bit so that you can call in with your comments. But there's a comment there that I must read. It says, hello Jadia, NCA is a good thing, but there is a lot of preference. I'm a relief vendor. I'm not too sure what that is. I applied for a license and they keep telling me the same thing over and over. They don't issue new licenses. For example, the huts at Pigeon Island, they put 2 vendors out and give it to other people who has other businesses in other places, and it's just another brunch. One was willing to pay because she was going.
No, it's kind of easy to say that one was paying, but no, our books would say differently. We go. I mean, we give people opportunities. For instance, and those huts at Pigeon Point. Yes, we have people. In fact, let me take it from the top. When that facility came about, what we did was those persons who were already vending at Pigeon Point, we gave them first priority to have those huts. However, it was moving from a situation of paying no rent or licenses at all, license fees, to a situation of paying rent because they became tenants.
Okay.
And you know, it's almost like a culture shock, I would imagine. And so that has been, I suppose, an issue. And some have been able to make it, and some have not been able to make it. But again, we go back to a point I was making earlier, that when you have too many persons in one area and doing the same things, you know, selling the same products, it could be a bit of a problem because, you know, you just have to share among too many people, and it becomes difficult to pay the rents in that case. So it was pretty much a legitimate thing for us in terms of the persons who are no longer there. In fact, in one case, the lady actually gave up the place. She said she can make it no longer. Okay. And the other one, she was unwell for a while, and she had already owed a few months. And so at the end of the day, again, I was saying, it's not because we're close to the sea. It's not because we're that close that, you know, you actually run on water. You can just run to the sea and get water. And we have our challenges with maintenance and everything else, you know. So.
There is a question about training, but I think we touched on that. But just for the sake of the personal message, I do not want anyone to feel that I'm ignoring the messages. The message says, on the issue of training, I do not believe that there is any, if at all, should I say, enough emphasis being placed on training staff. To have people on a daily basis going to the beaches simply to clean up, as far as I'm concerned, is an opportunity we are missing. They need to be educated, and some of them need to even understand why they're doing it. It is not just a job. We are basically protecting the future of our country. These staff need to be trained.
Oh, as a matter of fact, again, I'm saying under Minister Dalsan, we have had many firsts, and that's one of them. As I said earlier, we've had training with the Forestry Department in forestry management, identifying trees, how to fell trees, how to beautify, how to do good landscaping. We've had the turtle management training. We've had training in CPR and first aid.
Which is extremely important in this environment.
And the last one we had actually was training with the Sustainable Development Division, and all the staff around the beach and other designated areas attended the training, including those in the office. And so we went through, I mean, most of the things that sustainable development, water quality, sustainable use, ecosystems, biodiversity. So all those things our staff actually know about those, and we still continue to place emphasis on that area, because I'm saying again, that's one of the things that was lacking when I came in, and we're definitely covering a lot of ground, definitely.
On the issue of, I'm getting the sense that, and I understand why, because it is a more populated area, that the north of the island seems to be attracting more attention. But in terms of regulating, because we need to, as quite apart from just solving problems, we need to ensure that we use the examples and the experiences that we've had in the more populated areas to protect some of our other beaches. Any attention at all being paid to our beaches in the south? We have Puetsab, for example. We see people vending there from time to time, especially on the weekend. The Rudy John Beach Park, for example, is a very popular spot as well. And there are times you may find, although there are 2 establishments there, you may find individuals vending in that area as well. What kind of oversight would the NCA have in these 2 areas and in the other beaches in the south of the island as well?
Okay, we have we actually have, we've subdivided into 6 regions. Okay, currently we're active in 5 of them. The 6th really comes from the Poilin Bay area, going back to Cul-de-sac. Okay. But you would appreciate on the Atlantic side, you don't really get as many sea bathers and seagoers as you do on the Caribbean seaside. But we do have an officer, a field supervisor, and operates from the Poilin Bay, going back to PI, the PI beach, that PI area. And we have one operating from there, PI Rivadori area, going back to Soufrière. Okay, so those officers are expected to control the area. Just to let you know, as a matter of fact, that more recently we were not really paying the most attention to the Bois Chardon beach. We've begun to do that. We had not been giving attention to the Black Bay beach. We've begun to do that. We've been told about a beach in the Kokodan area, although we operate in the Kokodan area, but there's another beach somewhere more inland, I was told, more to the south, going more southwest. And I have actually sent the officer to check on it, and we were going to be giving some attention to that beach as well. So the Rudy John Beach, you said, well, we do actually have somebody stationed there. The PI Beach, we have somebody stationed there. So yes, we give attention to them. I must admit, though, the fact that they are a little bit away from our head office
Yes.
It's you know, you
They're mostly seen as community beaches as
right,
well, where people
yes.
come to recreate and to spend time.
Yeah.
If you have activities or social activities there, usually the activities like, for example, there's jazz and so on. And so because of the nature of the activities, there is the expectation that there is this contact between the NCA and these organizations. I think our viewers are getting very impatient, and I'm getting messages to open up the phone lines.
Let me just say before you go that
Sure.
another thing again I must compliment, and the Prime Minister in particular, is that talking about the South, and it almost like seems like we were neglecting, but that's really not the case. We do have a team that operates in the northern region called a conservation roving team.
Okay.
At one time, the name used to be Roving Crew. That's just it. But now it's a conservation roving team. Now, what we want to do is have a conservation roving unit. So we have a team in the north and a team in the south. And the Prime Minister in particular has been helping with that very much. In fact, that was one of the reasons why we got an increase in subvention. And so we have recruited some of the persons who are going to operate in that team. Now, the conservation roving team is very important, because I call them the heavy lifting team of the NCA. So where you'd want to do things like the bush and fell trees and do a lot more planting and that kind of thing, they are the ones who would go in to do that. So they equipped with chainsaws and weed eaters and cutlasses and all that kind of thing. And so we want to have such a team in the south. So we should have it soon, because we have most of the people in place already. So I just thought I should say that, because it's very important that we get a team like that in the south.
Okay. I would ask that our telephone number be put up on the screen. Imagine my cell phone is ringing. That's how anxious some people are to get onto the program. So 4527347, this is the number to dial. You may have a comment that you want to make or a question that you want to ask of Mr. Hippolyte. The discussion tonight, we're focusing on the NCA, and we'll spend some time looking at the whole issue of beach vending, because we understand that this is one of the troubling issues, and many persons have been calling for greater oversight in that area. So we'll go straight to the phone lines. Good night, you're on the air. Hello, good night. Hello.
Hello, good night.
Hi, good night. How are you?
Good night, Mrs. Emmanuel, and good night to Mr. Hippolyte.
Good night.
Mr. I have a question for you. We keep hearing that most of these organizations had no money to even bag a bottle in 2011. Tell me, when you became manager, did you meet a healthy balance?
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for that. Not really, no. As a matter of fact, the organization, had heavy liabilities. When we came into one of the sore points for the board, firstly, because the board came in before myself, and then myself, was that we found a gratuity liability of about $600 and something thousand. I mean, that means
liability is what you owe.
That is correct. Yes, yes. So in
did
other
you
words,
have you owed this, but did you have the money to pay it?
No, that's what I'm saying. So there was absolutely no money nowhere for that, and so we were quite alarmed by that. So a situation may have occurred that somebody would want to, because in our case, persons get gratuity after 10 years of service.
Okay.
And if somebody wants to leave at that point in time, then you really have to go hat in hand to the government, who's been giving you a subvention, to say, okay, please, bail us out from this.
But where are we now with that issue? Have we corrected this?
To some extent, yes, because what we did, the board had actually put in place, and I continued with it, is that we decided to have a gratuity fund. Okay, so we did open a bank account, and we started putting monies into that account. And we have actually been able to pay off a few people from that fund. Okay, of course, we would have loved it to be growing, much more quickly than it is now, but at least it's a start. And so we can, to some extent, handle some of the liability. So hopefully we'd grow it enough so that as people decide to, either achieve the age of retirement,
right,
and or decide to take their money well, before retirement, then at least we would have something there for them.
Indeed. We'll go back to the phone lines. Good night, you're on the air. Hello, good night. We've lost that call. 4527347 is the number to dial. In the meantime, you can send your comments. This comment said, good evening, JD and guests. I'm really stressing that your department should bring back the beach rangers, as you are aware of the number of tourists that are being robbed. We need a safer environment for our visitors and locals to be relaxed. Good night, you're on the air.
Good night.
Hello, good night.
Good night.
And good night to your guests.
Good night. Good night.
Calling from Denry South.
Yes.
The particular, you're a National Conservation Authority.
That is correct, yes.
Which would include the Denry Beach.
That is correct, yes.
I realized some time ago you were trying to do some work at Fordor.
Right,
Okay. Now, we have the Denry Island there.
Right.
I noticed that there's some kind of access being built onto get into the island.
Right.
To that island. Apart from that, we have a influx of seaweed,
right,
which has conquered our total seaside, and it doesn't only happen on our side, also on the east coast,
right,
on the west coast. Sorry,
right.
I'm saying, what is National Conservation Authority? What are you all doing, or what can we do together with the village council, the constituency councils, to clean up that mess?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for your comment.
Okay, yes, actually it's a bit of a problem for us as well. We really and truly it's a difficult thing, because you really need a lot of resources to really clean up to the extent that you would want. We've actually looked at working with other organizations, the Sustainable Development Division. In fact, we had a meeting with them along with the National Trust and some of the other agencies to see how best we could really tackle that problem. I know once before it had happened, the Sagosa seaweed was posing a problem, and the Nemo, actually, I think they got some funding to help clean it up. So we're actively looking for a way to deal with that situation.
But what exactly is happening at the islet in Denry? Because I did notice the access being created in that area.
No, it might be the National Trust. It's something I would probably need to find out about.
Okay, yes, but I did notice that there was some activity in this area, so the caller is in fact correct. Good night, you're on the air.
Hi, pleasant good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Yes, a question for you in regards to what has been happening of late, and that is the drownings. Now, when you look at the aspect of it, we luckily, and I say luckily, have erected some lifeguard towers at some beaches in the north. But at the same time, your department has been, of course, as you stated, there's always needs for funding to conduct projects.
Right.
But life saving is one project, and I know a proposal was sent in that holidays and certain weekends be looked upon in assistance with getting lifesavers, lifeguards on these public beaches. And I think it should be of utmost concern because of recent, we've had so many drownings. Not only do we have persons bathing in waters that are way too rough for them to bathe in, but there's no one there to tell them not to bathe in that water, or at least coax them not to a certain extent, or have the law, as you would put it, on their side to say, listen, we want to save us all, because it hurts everybody's pocket, from the Coast Guard, the taxpayer in general. It's quite costly. To families, it's quite costly. Given the issue, as a proposal from your department in the sense of the money that is needed to house such a project, being proposed, maybe for the next budget sit-in, it can be looked into, and monies can somehow or the other. We know how many holidays are in a year. I think a mathematical equation can be derived.
That seems to be the time. Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
I mean, it's of most importance, and we've all been hearing of it, but we haven't been doing anything. There are models, Barbados, there's Jamaica, Trinidad, wonderful. You see, so we need to follow it, and I believe that the government needs to look into that, and I hope given that a proposal was sent in regard to that to your office, that proposal is used from the relevant body, which is the life-saving body, to push for lifeguards of some kind on our beaches, at least on those important days.
Agreed. Thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
contribution.
Okay, well, we've been having discussions with the Life Saving Association. In fact, the last we were getting into is that the association was looking to get into a pilot project at Pigeon Point. And we agreed to that project. In fact, we had already agreed to allow them to make use of our ranger's hut in that area. So that's where we are with as far as the negotiations are concerned. In fact, when we were discussing, I was a little bit surprised to learn that you don't just have a lifeguard station, but I was told that you actually have to change lifeguards every half hour.
Oh.
That's what the gentleman mentioned to me.
Okay.
So I was.
But in terms of our human resource and so on, we have sufficient trained lifeguards.
That is where we were. In fact, that's why we wanted to have the pilot project. So
responsibility for safety on the beaches, it would fall in your...
Well, we actually have in our act that we're supposed to advise the minister where lifeguard facilities are supposed to be installed.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
so
beyond the advice, who the responsibility to actually approve and to employ and so on, and to train and to ensure that we have lifeguards on the beaches, would that be on the NC as well?
Because it is in our act, yes,
okay.
it would fall on
okay, so it moves beyond the advice
okay. Exactly.
Understood.
Yeah, so as I said, yes, so we had discussions with them, and we're still actually trying to complete those discussions, so at least we would know, I mean, because it would take a sizable investment first to build the towers, and that too is another issue. The towers are to be built in a particular manner.
Yes.
Yes,
And I think in a particular direction.
That is correct.
It depends on the wind, and it seems simple, but I know it's complicated.
Yes, it is.
But in terms of educating the public, education, well, there is a matter of many of us not being able to swim, despite being from St. Lucia and being surrounded by water and so on. But there's the issue of education too, where we hear the weather report every day, but we are not able to interpret it and to understand, except if it just says sea beavers are advised to be, cautious and so on. But in order to be able to understand, even the flags, maybe in the absence of lifesavers, we may take up the policy or may make it our business to ensure that we put certain flags that could guide visitors to the beach, but beyond just putting it up so that we could understand the difference between a white and a red, because I certainly am not even too sure if I were to go to the beach and see a red versus a white flag, what exactly does it mean? So there is room for that form of engagement and education of the public, even while we work on the resources and ensuring that we have.
Yes, in our discussions with the Life Saving Association, all those things were mentioned.
Okay.
Including flags and signs and so on. Training, life-saving training, and so on. So we actually covered a lot of the things that are necessary to get as part of our beach management policy. As I said, we just need now to try and finalize everything. I know it will take a lot of resources because, as I told you, the lifeguards for one, having to rotate them, like every 30 minutes it's a big undertaking.
Sure, indeed. 452-7347, you can call in with your questions or your comments. Good night, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.
David?
Hi.
Yeah, on that day, that week where we had so many people that got drowned, it was I find it was really concerning to find out what really caused that number of persons, people drowning on that week. I think to myself, maybe it could have been an underwater current,
right?
Because the sea itself was. If you look at it, there were certain places that was very nice. I went to Latok and it wasn't that bad, and but it could have been You know, because when you sometimes you have underwater current, and it is very difficult to swim against the underwater current. You know, and this actually could pull you out, even when you think you're swimming towards shore.
Right. Right.
You know, the current is even faster pulling you out.
Right.
Than you could get to land. You know, and this could have been something that, I mean, we the natives, we have to study, you know, what really caused so many people got drowned on that week.
Yep.
You know? What do you think about it?
I agree.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you. I agree with you. I mean, the dynamics of the sea is something that, you know, people need to know. But again, all that comes with the life-saving training, the association. All those things they specialize in. In fact, another thing I was told is that they get persons from overseas, from outside of St. Lucia, to come in to I think it's the Life Saving International, the international body, and they get them to come in and all those areas that they train people, educate people in. So as I said, it would be a good thing for us to continue with the negotiations, and hopefully we can get through to the end of it. But it is, I can tell you, it's a mammoth
really must
undertaking.
be done, yes,
it is
in
a
that
mammoth
area.
undertaking.
Just a comment that says, JD, I want to sing praises to the hardworking men and women who clean our beaches on a daily basis. They face the worst types of waste, including dead animals and human feces. We have seen a great improvement since the formation of the NC, and these workers must be commended. Good night, you on there?
Yeah, good night.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
I just want to make a suggestion to Mr. Hippolyte. Don't you think that we should erect some signage in the more dangerous areas? You put some strict commands or directions, indicating to persons that this area is strictly prohibited for bathing because of the strong sea current or something. But let's look at doing something of that nature.
Right. Yes.
As a start.
Especially where the last incident took place. Right away, we should be thinking of erecting some kind of signage there,
right,
to let people know that the currents there are high.
Right.
So let us look at doing this.
Yes,
in the future, okay?
Yes, thanks for that.
Many thanks. Okay.
Yes, and I agree with you. And as I say, we've started slowly. Again, remember, I always say it's as I've been saying, the resources. If they are actually at your disposal, then it is easy.
But do we even know? Because I get the Boishadow, for example, where this 4-year-old drowned. This is a relatively calm. I mean, if you were to walk that entire stretch of beach, you would bathe there before you bathe lower down at Patsab, because it is a relatively calm and shallow area. And then we had a drowning in that area. Do we even know at what point, or because I know surely there are some beaches because of the current and so on that are just dangerous, and we know that, and we should advise people not to.
Right.
But the 4 cases that we had over the Independence weekend, were any of these, do we even know whether these beaches are dangerous and people should not be bathing there in the first place?
No.
Or are they relatively safe, if you can call any beach safe, relatively safe and, popular recreational areas?
Yeah, in the last few days, a couple of weeks, because it's been very windy, and that goes along with, sea surge, getting more sea surge and so on. Yes, there's a fair idea. We have a fair idea.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good start.
The dangerous beaches, and if we don't know all, I mean, we can ask our partners, and they would guide us. What we're trying to do too, another thing, in fact, I thought I think I should tell the public, is that we're really trying now to see how best we can get to funding agencies to assist us in the work that we do. Because, I mean, the government, as I said before, is trying, and they have assisted us. But the point is that, because of the amount of work we have to do, we really need a lot more resources. particularly financial. And so that is one area that we really have to get into. You know, we've not really pursued that area, you know, vigorously.
Yes, yes.
But now in fact, it's on the front burner now.
Given where we are and our limited resources, we have another call on the line. Good night. Thank you for calling. Hello.
Hello. Good night.
Hi. Good night.
Yes. I just wanted to contribute this. I realize that even if it's like a situation where there's a normal weather system or whatever, even when it's bad, there's inclement weather, it doesn't matter because people will go out regardless.
Yeah, it happens sometimes.
Yes. So
even during hurricanes, it happens sometimes,
exactly.
which is sad.
Yes.
Yes.
I suppose it's just a matter of, again, educating. I mean, I'm one of those, maybe because of the fact that I'm involved in the environment. I listen to the weather report quite often. And you know, things like you want to know when is high tide, when is low tide, if this, you know, how much you can do in terms of sea bathing, how careful you have to be. So I think it's something that we just need to educate persons and no, it's not just taking off.
Hope they make the right decision.
That is correct.
But we must present them with the information.
Yes.
Yeah. Most definitely.
Thank you so much, Colin.
I also wanted to point out that perhaps there could be more education in terms of not just the children learning how to swim, but the entire population have the opportunity for swimming classes.
Right.
It's obviously a problem.
I agree.
It is.
I agree.
It is.
Too many deaths, too many people are being lost every year to drowning, so obviously it is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Right, yes.
Agreed.
Right, yeah.
Thank you so much for your contribution. And yes, too many of us, including myself, unable to swim. And two, sometimes we really take risks, because even though we do not have reports of drownings every week and every weekend and so on, sometimes we go to the beach and we observe certain things. We observe sometimes our children, you know, being given a certain level of freedom on the beach that would concern. We observe sometimes two people consuming alcohol and then going into the water. And even though it's our beach and we go there every weekend, we certainly have to exercise some level of responsibility.
That is correct.
You know, I'm not excusing the responsibility of the authorities to educate and to ensure that we have lifeguards, but in all of this, there has to be a certain level of personal responsibility as well.
We must think safety first.
Indeed,
you know, definitely we need
I have a question coming in via WhatsApp. Is it allowed for a vendor to have 2 different licenses to vend in 2 different places, or is there a maximum, minimum?
No, it is actually, in fact, allowed. That if you want to operate in another area, that's okay. Again, we don't really want to limit people, but at the same time, we, as I said, we want to control it enough so that as many people as possible can. But certainly, if we have an area and somebody is willing to operate in that area and has been operating in another area, I mean, we would be in a position to know that the person would be paying their licenses promptly and so on. You know, so that is something that we take into consideration.
Another call. Good night, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, if you could lower the volume on your television set, please. Are you there, caller? If you need to lower the volume on your television. Thank you. You can go ahead.
Okay. Good evening to you and your guest.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I heard Mr. Hippolyte said about a $250 license to be paid. So what is in place for the vendors on the ramp? Which I noticed they are only carrying their own tent. They have to pay $1 to go to Spinnakers to use the washroom. So why they are paying that $250?
Well, we actually charge the fee for you to get the license. I always tell people that, you know, it's just like going for your driver's license. You go pay it every month, but you're not given a car, right, or a vehicle. I mean, I tell people that as well. Say again, sorry?
Yeah, but I noticed other places like on the lay-by, they have a shelter. Other places, look, you said whatever you're going to transfer what building to whatever stadium. I mean, they're going to have a washroom there for them. The facility is there for them.
Are there different rates?
But what about those on the run for so long?
Yeah, well,
and the real question to you again: is there something behind with that liquor, that pizza that people are selling there, or is just an issue for that? Because suddenly, just out of the blue now, it's just a big issue. The person look for $50 license to sell a little piton. You know, sometimes when you ask the tourist to buy something, it's costing $5. They'll go down with you at $1.
Okay.
There's a lady there who asked for a tourist for something for $5. Then she said to her, she said it's too expensive. The lady said to her, take it for free. But the free means $3. And the tourist just picked up everything and left.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And all the lady could have just do, just watch she go with it.
Oh my. Wow.
When you ask a tourist to buy something for $20 and they'll come as low and say, I only can pay $5. That's an insult.
I understand.
That's a daily bread. The people trying to make a daily bread. You see, your license is not issued to sell alcohol. But if they went as far and get a license, a temporary license to sell, I see nothing wrong in that.
Thank you so much for your contribution, caller. We'll give Mr. Hippolyte an opportunity to respond.
Well, let's go first to the thing what you mentioned about shelter and so on. Well, yes. For instance, at Pigeon Point, there is shelter, there are washrooms, but we have the persons that are there mainly those that are tenants, so they pay they pay rental every month,
which would be more than the license fee.
Certainly, certainly, because a monthly amount. Yes, you know. Excuse me. Then the other persons who actually sell on the beach, they pay to use the washrooms. Now that's different because those who are tenants don't pay. Okay, so that's the arrangement we have. In terms of Mon Lay, we don't have a shelter at Mon Lay. We do have washrooms, yes. So that statement, you know, I just want to correct her that we don't have a shelter there. We have a structure, yes, but there's no shelter in that regard. The other part of it, we don't give licenses to sell alcohol. That is something we don't do. Somebody wants to sell alcohol, as I say, they can do it outside of our jurisdiction if they have the proper licenses and so on, you know, from the customs department. But for us, we don't. And there's a reason for it. So, for instance, around the areas like hotels and restaurants that are close to the beach, you know, I mean, they pay licenses as well. They pay their own licenses. They pay their rents. They pay their taxes and so on. So that is one of the reasons why we don't issue licenses to do those, to sell alcohol, because we don't want to appear to have our persons competing with those entities. You understand? So.
Indeed. We have another call. Good night. Thank you for calling. We've lost that call. 452-7347 is the number to dial, and you can continue to send in your messages as well. Someone is asking, is it permissible that a vendor can rent his or her license? That doesn't sound or look good to me, but I'll still give you an opportunity to respond.
No, licenses are not transferable. In fact, we had a situation like that very recently, and we suspended the persons involved.
Okay. Yeah. He quickly said, even though they are not using it, people rent their road bands all the time, and there is not a problem. Why do they insist on squeezing the poor people?
No, on our act, licenses are not transferable according to our act, so we don't allow it.
Okay. An individual says, where a vendor has been operating for so many years, even though that individual is behind on rent, I think there needs to be some level of sympathy. Imagine a vendor being on the beach for 20 years and that person has to face being removed because they have not paid their license or because they owe in the NCA. We've lost that call. Good night, you're on the air?
Yeah, is the NCA responsible for the vendors on the sidewalk in Castries?
No, the NCA is not responsible. That's the area of the councils, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe I should get involved too, because I'm doing something with the sidewalk.
No, we don't encroach on our partners' jurisdictions.
Thank you for that contribution. I believe that person was ready to make a contribution and to ask you a few questions about vending in that area. There's a question coming in saying, what is the relationship between the NCA and the Vendors Association. Are people granted licenses to operate on the beach, for example, permitted to be part of the Vendors Association and to be represented by an association that is made up of or formed specifically in the interest of those vending in the city?
Well, I don't know that. I don't know if the persons that we have licensed are actually linked in any way to the that vendors association. What we do encourage, though, is for persons operating in specific areas to form themselves into associations, you know, into groups, so that they can, I suppose, they can better negotiate and do that. Even in their purchases. They can, rather than do it individually, they can do it as a group to benefit from quantity discounts and so on, you know.
There's an individual who's asking for clarification. It's just about time for us to close, by the way. And this is the same individual who asked about an individual being permitted to have 2 different licenses to vend in 2 different places. That individual is saying that to the best of his or her knowledge, this is an offense under the NCA Act. So is asking that you clarify the point again as to whether one individual is permitted to hold 2 different licenses to vend in 2 different places.
Yeah, well, no, we don't have any such thing being prohibited in the Act, you know. It just simply says that we can issue licenses, but there is no limit to the number that you can issue to persons. Just in terms of licenses and so on, I just wanted to say something. That as part of our responsibility for beach management, one of the things we really have to do is to minimize or eliminate user conflict. I mean, that's a big thing, you know, and that's one of the reasons why we just cannot issue licenses without taking many of those things into consideration. So we don't want to bring, say, boat operators into conflict with jet ski operators, into conflict with vendors on the beach, into conflict, you understand? So it's one thing that we, you know, in terms of the logistics, we really have to make sure that we have that covered, and you know, so that we avoid having user conflict.
Someone is just asking, do the jet ski operators have the freedom to operate on just any beach?
No. In our case, those persons with jet skis are at a particular beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think the issue there in question is what, you know, the sea bathers versus
those
who are using for other purposes.
Right, user conflict. We try to avoid that. And so, in fact, what has been happening, again, one of our partners is the St. Lucia Air and Seaports Authority. And they have jurisdiction over the sea, really, you know, again, one of the overlaps. And we've been looking at trying to do some demarcation of certain areas. So you clearly define the areas where jet skis can be, where people skiing could be, where sea bathers should be, where yachts should be anchored, and so on.
Right.
There's a plan for the Rodney Bay area, and as soon as that comes through, then we could roll it to other areas.
Indeed. I want to, before we close the program, I want to focus, just to move away from the licensing issue just a little bit. I'm still receiving a number of questions and comments, but from what you said, I'm sure I would be able to respond to some of these individually. But I want to go back to the NCA as an authority and as an organization. Certainly, licensing would just be one part of your responsibility. I want to speak to your priority areas currently and moving forward. We did speak to some of the deficiencies you inherited from the onset, and we are now moving in a particular direction. What are the priority areas for the NCA right now?
Okay. One of the main areas, as I told you earlier, is to ensure that our staff continue to be trained. Also, we're very high now on making pitches to donor agencies so that we can try to extend what we're doing. And the other one that's really high on our agenda is to get more facilities going, either viewpoints or rest stops, like laybys, and also to see how much we can get facilities at the beaches, especially those high activity beaches that are lacking facilities. We made a start. We have Pigeon Point. We're having VG. As I said, we have plans for Casabah as well. At Point Sab as well. We also have plans for other areas. I was telling you about Mula Sheikh.
Yes.
Actually, just recently, somebody told us that they're willing to put monies, if they have to, into having such facilities at the Marisil Beach. Oh. I think the fact that we have those facilities like the Pigeon Point and the VG coming up now, you would probably get more people actually asking for facilities at more beaches around the island.
The phone lines are going, but we are just about to wrap up the program. In terms, when you spoke about your priority areas, you spoke about the funding and the training, and of course earlier on we spoke about the need for greater interaction between the NCA and members of the public.
Right. There
is one issue that we neglected to speak about when we spoke of the whole issue of licensing and so on. That is the authority of the NCA to take action where there has been a breach. Yes, you want to focus on education, you want to focus on keeping the beaches clean and so on, but in instances where the NCA has recognized that there is a problem, where individuals are not, or organizations, companies and so on, are not paying attention to the requirements in terms maybe dumping waste in areas that they're not supposed to. What action can the NCA take to ensure that, on the area of conservation and the protection of our public beaches in particular, that people understand that they too would have a responsibility? It's not just the NCA to clean up after, but certainly penalties would serve as a means of deterring.
Okay. Again, our Act gives us the power to, so for instance, we can charge and fine for a range of 4.
Charge or fine anybody recently?
No, not really. No.
So it means that we've been good?
For littering, not really. Again, remember the rangers?
Okay.
Yeah, so as long as, if we have the range. In fact, I was watching a document, I was looking at a document that we have when we had the unit. And in 1 year, there were 254 persons charged by the rangers. So you really need a rangers unit. But yes, we have, the Act gives us the power as far as littering and so on is concerned. However, if it goes beyond that and we don't have the power, or we're not given the power according to our Act, then we would get the appropriate agency to take action, whether it be the Solid Waste Management Authority, the National Trust, or one of those other agencies. You would realize that we had this recent incident with the fish at the Shock River,
yes.
The dead fish. Right, so we got involved, we got the other agencies, environmental health and so on involved. So that's what we do. Okay, so yeah.
Indeed. I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest tonight and for being willing to face, because, if we're dealing with issues particularly related to vending and issuing of licenses and so on, there are many of us who can get a little excited, and you heard from some of the calls as well. Right. So I want to thank you for that. I look forward to the updates from the NCA. We've heard some new things. You were telling me about the staff awards and things that are happening in the NCA.
And that's another first for the NCA, and again, I want to compliment and commend Minister Dalson for allowing us that kind of freedom to do those things. And so now we have the staff awards, and we recognize our staff quarterly, and we also we also have annual awards. Incidentally, as I'm mentioning that, NCA will be celebrating its 16th birth date on the 30th of April. So we'll be 16 years old, and we're
young organization.
Yeah. And this is when we have our annual staff awards around the date of our anniversary. So we recognize the staff member of the year and that kind of thing. Okay, but as I said, that's a first as well. During my tenure.
What is the staff complement right now? How many persons?
Oh, we actually have 102. We do have 92 that are basically permanent, and we have 93, and we have 9 as contractors.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so we have 102, which is a fair size compliment.
Yes, I must say thank you for being here. Indeed, I want to thank you so much, our viewers. Thank you for, as always, sending in your messages. I can see that the lines are still going, but unfortunately, it is time to close the program. Your messages via WhatsApp, BBM. We have a few emails as well. The show would be available on the YouTube channel sometime later on this week, so you can get an opportunity to review and to gather the information. I want to thank all of our callers, especially for sharing your views, for asking questions, and for joining us on In Touch. This has been another episode of In Touch. We'll be back here next week, Monday, with another informative and interesting discussion as well. Enjoy the rest of your week, and remember to be safe. Good night.